Hey folks, gonna go live here. So going live on YouTube and we're live. So welcome everyone. Welcome to, what is this? Our third or fourth one of these that we've done. And no, it's really cool. So today we're talking about, we're with VMware. I'm Bob Plankers. We've got Ken Warnerberg, Jatin Purohit, and Pete Fletcher with us. I don't know why I'm pointing at the screen. Just the way I am, I guess. This is fun. I enjoy doing these. We're with the vSphere and vSAN technical marketing teams at VMware, and we're a bunch of nerds that want to answer questions. And we're going to talk about upgrading and patching vSphere and vSAN today. And so if you've got questions, put it out in the chat and we'll answer them live. If you don't have questions, if you think of stuff afterwards, like hit us up. We've got Twitter handles and stuff like that here. You can find us, just search for us. And so, to get started here, as people join, we've got a few people coming in right now. I just wanted to, patching and upgrading. Upgrading is one of those things, people talk about if it ain't broke, don't fix it sort of thing, but patching is important. There's maybe some stuff broken sometimes, and upgrading, the idea of upgrading. Why should people upgrade? Jatin, you deal with vSphere upgrade questions all the time.
Yep.
Why should people upgrade?
New features, security. I think these two things which is very important for us, right? If you look at the vSphere 7 and whatever we will be talking over here in this particular session, most of the time we will be referencing vSphere 7 as our base standard for all of our conversation, right? If you look at the current vSphere 7, right, it has brought a dramatic change in terms of how vSphere has been in past, right? We have got vSphere with Tanzu, we have got vSphere with something called vSphere Lifecycle Manager, and then there are a bunch of security features we have there, right? So I think the answer is, if you want to keep up to the pace with the modern infrastructure, the upgrade is the path which you need to certainly go for. So I think in order to be relevant, in order to be modern in terms of your overall infrastructure strategy, it's important to keep up to date your vSphere infrastructure. And trust me, it's not that difficult.
Well, people seem to be scared about it for a variety of reasons. We'll get into that in a minute. Yes. I do want to ask Pete, though, too. Pete comes from the vSAN side of things, and the comment has always been with vSphere that, or at least with vSAN, when you upgrade vSphere, you get a whole new storage array, too, right?
Yeah, that's the thing, man. We're talking software. So upgrades are more than just security, making yourself more secure. I mean, heck, you can get serious performance gains just by upgrading software, which always blows my mind. Like, I don't know. I've come from a hardware background back in the day, and I just think like, wow, you get what you pay for. You want to have a super fast environment, you pay for this super fast server, for the fastest drives and all that. And some of that is still relevant. But it's amazing that you can, with just a little bit of a software upgrade, you can dramatically change the performance of your environment, as it pertains to vSAN for sure.
Yeah, I mean, look at what we did with AMD and CPUs in vSphere 7 Update 2 here. A few changes to the way cache is managed and NUMA layouts and stuff like that. Massive performance.
Yeah. Ken, vMotion is another example.
What?
vMotion is another example, right?
Oh, yeah.
We made significant improvements in DRS and vMotion. So yeah, certainly contributing to the performance factor of it.
Also features, right? Like, you guys know this, but like vSAN, there's like an army of engineers that are working on, 20 different features. And every upgrade, there's like a new feature. So we get the questions all the time. Hey, how do I take advantage of file services? Or I really want to get, my cloud native apps are starting to blow up. We heard that vSAN can handle that now. And it's like, well, yeah, in order to get that, you got to upgrade. So, there's always a benefit, whether it's security, whether it's performance enhancements, whether it's storage efficiency, but also just getting to take advantage of the latest, greatest features.
Yeah, I think to me, it's really interesting. That's what I love about VMware too. We sit at that real nice sweet spot of the software that interfaces between the users and the hardware. So we can take advantages of new hardware types. So if we introduce, like, for example, with 7.0 Update 2, we were right there with the latest NVIDIA cards, the Ampere A100s and things like that. So having up-to-date software means that you can take advantage of the latest hardware introductions that are coming along. And from the same perspective, we can change the architecture of how those things interface with it, to the point about vMotion and things like that. We can always re-architect our I/O paths in the software. So we can change and make it very flexible to take advantage of the new hardware or the new software architectures. But to do that, yeah, you got to be up to date. So it's a surprising amount of people that ask the question about, hey, I'm running, ESXi 5.5. Can I do this new thing? Like, nope. Nope.
No, well, and VMware used to backport features, and we're kind of trying to get away from that. We don't talk about it a lot, and just like we don't talk about our release models and release schedules a lot. But looking at the 6-month release cycles now that we're trying to do, and looking at the simplicity when we backport stuff, there's a lot of complexity in our code base, and we can do more stuff and do it better if we simplify that. And so, fixing the upgrade process, like people talk about, when I talk to people about upgrades, they're thinking about vSphere 5 to 5.1 to 5.5, which were horrific. And I say that I put my customer hat on. I was a customer in those days, and and I ended up calling support, and there were alarms that I just remember it was a kind of a mess, and that sticks in people's minds, and so I want to ask, because there's been a lot of work done for the 6 to 6.5 to 6.7 to 7 upgrade. It is really easy now. And so I guess my next question here, and then we'll get to some questions out in the chat. And I think I want to start again with you, Jatin. What are people worried about that maybe they shouldn't be worried about as part of upgrading and patching?
I think the most frequently asked questions are around vCenter server topology. And before I actually answer that particular part, what I personally recommend is have a better assessment of your current infrastructure. When I say assessment, you need to be aware of what are the VMware solutions you are running with, right? So for example, if you have got NSX in your infrastructure, so before attempting something like vSphere upgrade, make sure that the current NSX version is up to date with your desired version of vSphere 7, right? And there is a nice KB article which basically talks about the upgrade order in which you need to basically proceed with the different VMware solutions upgrade. The key over there is, let's say if you have got NSX, vRealize Automation, vRealize Orchestrator, there is always a minimum compatible version with the vSphere 7, right? And that KB article, I think I will put it into the chat. It basically talks about the upgrade order, right? So once we have this kind of assessment, it becomes really easy to understand the dependency between different VMware solution with vSphere, because at the end of it, if you look at the vSphere, it is the core infrastructure function within your whole enterprise architecture, right? A lot of things are dependent on vSphere. So it's really a good practice to have a great assessment of your overall infrastructure, and there are resources available on VMware, docs.vmware, on kb.vmware.com, and we can help you with that. Now, coming back to the most frequently asked questions, right? It's mostly around vCenter server topology. In past, we had great combination of topologies in which you can deploy your vCenter server. Somewhere down the line, we felt that it certainly adds a bit of complexity in your overall infrastructure, right? So think about having a vCenter server with external PSC controller. And then
I get the PSC question all the time.
Yeah. And then you basically further deploy something like vCenter server HA, and then you also have multiple vCenter server in a single sign-on domain, right? Which we call it as enhanced link mode. So if we look at the entire topology stack, right? The bottom line, which I would say is, starting from vSphere 7, the topology has been simplified to a great extent. We don't really support the external PSC now. And as a part of that, when you start doing the upgrade of vCenter server, the upgrade process itself converge the external PSA to the embedded one, right? So that's really a great help over there with the installer itself. So think like this. I split the vCenter topologies in three ways. The first one is very simplified one. You have a vCenter server with embedded PSC controller. Then you have a vCenter server with external PSA controller, and then you can have vCenter server with VCHA. Let's go one by one. Embedded PSC controller, I don't think we have much challenge over here. The installer is great. It really walks you through with the upgrade process seamlessly. You don't really need to bother about that. When it comes to the external PSC controller, in past, especially with something like vCenter 6.5 or 6.7, if you want to converge your external PSC controller to an embedded one, there used to be a manual process to do that, and then you can further attempt your vCenter server upgrade. But starting from vCenter 7, if you have got external PSC controller, the upgrade process will take care of itself, right?
So people don't have to converge their PSCs. They can just let them go. Yes, they're deprecated, but that doesn't mean not supported. They're still fully supported, and people can just let the 7 upgrader do its thing, and it'll take care of it for them.
Yes. So the thing is, technically, if I put it in this way, there is nothing like PSC starting from vCenter 7, right? So if you choose to upgrade the external PSC controller vCenter server, the upgrade process automatically converge the external PSC to an embedded one. So it's a 2-part process. In the first part, the installer will deploy a new virtual machine and start the vCenter server. And then in the second part, it will start converging the external PSA to the embedded one. But this is completely a guided approach. You don't really need to converge the external PSC controller to embedded one and then attempt the vCenter server upgrade. So I think that greatly simplifies the upgrade process.
It's funny how many questions come about that and how much fear people seem to have about this convergence because they're changing the architecture. But I think there's no reason.
Yes.
For 2 things, like just to summarize a couple of points in there. 1, it's automated for you. There's nothing you really need to do in that process. And 2, you can do it at any point. You can converge early, you can converge late. There's no
or
rush.
Just let the installer do it. Honestly,
let the installer do it. Yeah.
The installer takes care of it. Let it do it as part of the upgrade. Like don't mess with. I don't like the if it ain't broke, don't fix it thing. But in this case, it's totally relevant. So, Jen, did you had a third model there? Did you get all of your?
Yeah, in this also category, you might also have a Windows vCenter server, right? Important to note over here, starting from vCenter 7, there is no Windows vCenter server. So for that, we have a migration tool. And as similar to the VCSA upgrade with external PSC controller or a Windows vCenter server with external PSC controller or embedded one, you basically don't really need to do any extra effort in order to converge your vCenter server. So the bottom line is the installer itself takes care of all the convergence part if you have an external PSA controller or you have a Windows vCenter server. Now things comes with vCenter server HA, right? Great feature, but in past it used to add certain complexity in terms of upgrading the vCenter server with VCHA. So in past, you need to basically break the VCH and then attempt the vSphere or vCenter server upgrade. Now, starting from vCenter 7, so if you are on 6.5 or 6.7, this is again the upgrade path. So if you are on any of these versions, you can directly upgrade to 7.0, right? So as a part of the upgrade process, when you upgrade the active node, the upgrade process itself deploys the passive and witness node. So again, there is no manual effort involved in upgrading the VCHA. So I think if we look at a very high level, the first thing which you should be doing is find your current vCenter server topology and be sure that upgrade process actually takes care of all the convergence and these kind of things. And we do have a great documentation available on docs.vmware.com, which basically explains the entire upgrade process and walk you through with each and every step one by one.
That's cool. Wow, that was a brain dump and a half, dude. Like that was awesome. So there's definitely a reason why you're our upgrade guy. Pete, I want to ask you the same question. What are people worried about with vSAN during upgrades and things like that maybe they shouldn't be worried about?
Yeah. So, little known fact, when I was younger and I was in the Air Force, as a side hustle, I used to do a little software development for this Mexican restaurant. I used to work for tacos. True story. It fed me. But I wrote this little software program for this Mexican restaurant, and it helped him, manage his daily totals. It helped him do a lot of other things. And then I left. That was in Germany. I left Germany, and it was on this old PC. It actually used a zip drive for the data. This is how old it was, right? He kept that PC for 10 years after that. And I found this out later because he finally called me one day and said, "Hey, you remember that thing you did for me? Can you help me?" It finally broke. But the funny story was, like, he would never let anybody touch that PC in his company. Like, you can't go near this PC because it has to work the way it is. And we don't want any changes, no upgrades, no nothing. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's, not everybody works in a Mexican restaurant, but it's a true story. There are a lot of people that they will not upgrade just for fear of an outage.
Yeah, and being scared of your infrastructure, though, that's broken.
Yeah.
Anyhow, go ahead, please.
Yeah, unless you're making tacos, that's probably not the way you want to do it. You probably want to have a little bit more faith. There should be a better process. But and so I think that's one of the big things, especially when it comes to infrastructure, enterprise environments. People are afraid of outages, but that's just the wrong mentality because for one, these things are certainly more robust. There's a lot of tools now, especially we'll talk a little bit more about this as we go further. But some of the tools now for upgrading are pretty intense, like vSphere Lifecycle Manager, where it gives you full on understanding of what the upgrade is going to happen. It does a lot of pre-checks. It's it's not like it's YOLO is no longer a thing. So but yeah, I'd say fear of an outage is a big hesitancy for many, and I think that's probably unnecessary when it comes to upgrading vSphere and vSAN.
Well, look, I mean, part of the whole point in upgrading, I think this is alluded to at the very start, there can sometimes be improvements in terms of resilience of the infrastructure. So you're gaining uptime by upgrading.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, I want to take exception to something you said there. I mean, unless you're making tacos are part of critical infrastructure. If there's anything that we have learned from the last year and a half, tacos are critical infrastructure. So,
good point.
I demand uptime on those environments.
Yeah. But, a lot of this stuff speaks to architecture too. And I see this a lot with patching and security stuff. I do a lot of security things, and why people don't patch is because they're scared of the patches, and we talk about like vSphere 7 update 1, I think it was, increased the scale of vSphere clusters. So you can now have 96 hosts in a cluster. But is it better to have 96 hosts in one cluster or 248 host clusters? That way you can patch one. And if something does go wrong, you can also split your apps between them. You can make some architectural decisions that are better, and you can do rolling updates because, nobody's got a test environment that's worth anything. And I say that knowing full well that as a customer, back in the day, I had a test environment for a long time that was just old hardware, and it didn't match current stuff. And because current stuff, well, why would we fund that, And so I would use nested ESXi hosts and things like that to test, but that's not the same.
It's not the same.
Production and test are never the same, and so we just need to own that fact. It's not going to change unless organizations spend a bunch of money to make a test environment look identical to production, and even then, it's really hard. We just need to have better strategies for rolling patches out and rolling updates out.
It was an interesting thing back in the day when I was covering Site Recovery Manager. And of course, you have multiple sites there, multiple VCs, all the rest of these pieces together. The question always came up, what sequence should I use to upgrade my environment? And, we'll use the replication site, the secondary site, whatever you want to call it. Well, that's probably not the best practice. I mean, you're probably better off upgrading your primary site first, because that way you have recoverability throughout that entire process. So that was always my guidance, is like, no, not YOLO it, but you plan it out, you do it correctly, and then you you have a low risk upgrade that is actually reduced because you have recoverability very, very quickly and easily if something should go wrong, like there's a power outage during your cycling. But actually, that's something I think we should probably talk about too. Like, how do you upgrade then? I mean, we talked about some of the processes, but I don't know. Let's vSAN. Is there
Can I stop you for a second?
No. Now that I've started, there's no stopping.
I do have a mute button here. No, I'm sorry. I want to get to how. I think how is really good. I did want to point out your comment about DR sites and that. People link their DR sites together all the time in ways that they probably shouldn't, like linked mode and stuff like that. Linked mode copies stuff from one site to the other. Your DR site is no longer a separate entity from your production site. I learned this the hard way. There was not that we ever have bugs in our software, but there was a bug in vSphere 6.7 when it was just released, where the customer experience improvement program, the telemetry stuff, added a corrupt thing to the LDAP server on the PSCs, and then replicated it places, and then everything just froze and freaked out. And so I lost my primary site and my DR site. Yay, So be careful of that. Anyhow,
linked mode within a site, have 4 VCs, two in each site, and have them linked, but don't don't
cross sites, because if something happens to one, there's replication between them. Anyhow, I'd like to get to some of the questions here. These folks have been waiting very patiently, and I appreciate that. Eugene asks, Eugene and Kim, it looks like, asks, they both ask, upgrading ESXi 6.7 to 7 on Dell servers using 16 gig SD cards as the only media on the server. What do I need to look out for? And what are best practices for local direct attached storage with these? So, Jatin, I think that falls to you. Do you have any thoughts for these folks?
So the important thing about ESXi upgrade, right? So as we have clearly stand out, what are the changes we have with vCenter 7? We do have a very critical change in terms of how the ESXi system storage is laid out, right? So starting from vSphere 7, the system storage layout for ESXi has got changed, right? When we say change, what we mean is basically the size of the boot partition, the size of the VMFS volume, all those things have got changed. We have a blog available on this particular topic, which basically talks about all of these change. But typically, the end point over here is that if you are upgrading your ESXi host with less than 128 GB of storage, it is supported. It is fully supported on SD card and all other platforms. But don't expect a VMFS data store spinning out on the ESXi host, right? So the idea is any storage which is more than 128 GB in size, that will be consumed as the VMFS data store, but rest of the storage will be consumed by the ESXi system storage. So coming back to this specific question, for the SD card, the minimum requirement is 8 GB. You need to have at least 8 GB storage available. And if you have that, I think you should be fine. You should be good in upgrading that.
And the upgrade process takes care of it, right? They don't really have to worry about anything? Okay, cool.
No.
So I want to learn VMware administration. Any documents, please? Ken, what do we have for stuff around that people can learn how to do VMware administration?
Well, we have a bunch of material, of course, on vmware.com. There's all sorts of instructional and educational material that you can look at as well. There's a dedicated education site for learning, and there's a whole bunch of material there. But one of the sites that we've released in the last 6 months or so is core.vmware.com, which is a technical repository of information. It has blogs, it has tech notes, it's got demos and videos and things like that. And it's written mostly by people like you're looking at right now. And we've gone through and tried to really showcase how to get things out of the product sets. So the documentation, of course, will tell you how to do things very well. It tells you the formalized processes for doing things within vSphere and within the environment. And what we're trying to do with our tech zone instance, core.vmware.com, is really showcase a little more usage and how to get things out of the product set that might not just be, the end-to-end documents. So I'd say the combination of those two sites, core.vmware.com and our documentation portal for whichever product you're looking at, are probably the two primary sites. If you're looking for formalized education, I'm not sure what the landing zone is currently, but there are so many different certification paths and accreditation paths and courses that you can take. It's not funny, but start at core. We have vSAN, of course, and vSphere and Cloud Foundation, but a whole bunch of other technical documents there as well under those three product areas.
There's a couple of really good podcasts out there as well.
Yeah, virtually speaking.
Just going to throw out to Pete.
Yeah. Not that we're going to promote other sorts of media, but yeah, Pete and friends do a great podcast, virtually speaking, and no, it's great. So I also wanted to mention Hands-On Labs. There's a ton of great self-service hands-on labs. If you want to try out something new, we get a lot of questions about the identity federation feature in vCenter Server 7. How do I add multi-factor authentication? How does this work? How do I set up? Turns out there's a lab for it, and it's all set up. You can walk through all of the steps for it. Same for VM encryption, VTPMs, all that stuff. A lot of questions about all that stuff, and just go to the lab. You can check it out, and you can do it on your own. You can do it from the comfort of your home, like we've all been doing for the last year. And yeah, it's pretty cool. So what are new features in vSphere 7 Update 2 for vSAN and NSX? Pete, do you folks have a what's new thing out on Core?
Yeah,
vSAN?
we definitely do. So yeah, and that's going to be the recurring answer, I think, and that's a good thing. But yeah, core.vmware.com, that's where we usually put not only blogs, but just a lot of technical documentation, whether it's design and sizing guides, but also tech notes, what's new guides, what's new documents, and so there's just a lot. And there's also offline demos there, a lot of great content out there, and certainly what's new in update 2 is there's a lot of great content out there for that as well. Cool.
So
go ahead.
No, let's carry on with the questions, I think, for now, and then come back. Sorry.
Is the process to go from 2 linked vCenters, in apparently a Horizon environment, running 6.7 to 7 easy? And there's a couple of questions here about linked mode and Elm and stuff like that. Jatin, is that something you can speak to? The ease of updating a linked mode environment? Are there gotchas? Is there a particular order you have to go in?
Yes, certainly. So on the Horizon part, I think I'm not really familiar with the Horizon environment.
No,
so
it's just underlying.
I assume it should be a smooth process like with any other VMware solution. But specifically answering to enhanced link mode, the key thing we need to remember is before upgrading the vCenter server, ensure that you have a good vCenter server backup. It is irrespective whether you are upgrading a vCenter server in an enhanced link mode or you are upgrading as a standalone vCenter server. I think the most of the time, which I figured out after speaking with the customers, they don't really take the vCenter server backup properly, right? So we have 2 ways in terms of you can back up your vCenter server. The first one is basically the built-in, the native, and the recommended approach to do the file level backup of the vCenter server. You can access this particular wizard through WAMI page. You can log into the appliance management interface and configure the backup from there. The second approach is through using the vSphere data protection APIs, right? You can use any outside solution outside of VMware, and you can configure the vSphere data protection, and it basically provides you the image level backup. So we have two ways in which you can backup, but my recommendation would be to always go for the file level backup. Now coming back to the specific question on enhanced link mode, the idea over here is upgrade one server at a time, one vCenter server at a time, and then keep moving the upgrade process in a sequential way. So assuming that you have 5 or 7 vCenter server in a single sign-on domain, upgrade one server at a time, and you can take the time of time upgrading the other vCenter server as you feel so. But what happens is when you upgrade the vCenter server in an enhanced link mode, the installer actually tells you whether you are upgrading the first server in the topology, or you are upgrading the subsequent vCenter server in the topology. And based on that, you basically go with the upgrade process. So what happens is, once you upgrade the vCenter server, it pretty much works with the other vCenter server in the enhanced link mode. By default, it creates the replication agreement with other PSCs in the environment. But just in case, if you have the external PSC, and if you are embedded one, no worries, you can continue doing the next vCenter server upgrade. But just in case, if you are in enhanced link mode with external PSC, there is a post upgrade script within the vCenter server appliance as well as within the Windows server. So ensure that you execute that particular script, which basically ensures that the replication is up to the date with the other vCenter server. But assuming that
that's part of the documentation and stuff, like people know to do that.
That's part of the documentation. But yeah, the key thing which I would like to highlight is upgrade one server at a time. And once you are done with the last server upgrade, create a replication agreement with your last server to the first server vCenter.
As a ring.
Yeah, vCenter server, and ensure that you complete the ring topology as a part of the enhanced link mode. So I think the upgrade process is smooth. You don't really need to take care of any additional thing, except that if you are working with external PSC controller, ensure that you execute the post upgrade script in that particular process.
Cool. I learned something there. Let's see. If I understand correctly, 7 automatically converts your external PSC controller to embedded one. Yes. In fact, we talked a little bit about that. In fact, yeah, it's very smooth. And Jatin just talked about the gotcha, maybe not a gotcha, but you just make sure that you run that script. Yeah. Somebody saying that it was smooth. If they converted it beforehand, that's cool. That's always good to hear, positive feedback. We're kind of in the no news is good news business, which kind of stinks, like that's IT in general, but we never hear if
you're
it
the
works.
Security guy, Bob. I mean, it's truer for you than for most, I think.
True. Yeah, if there's news and I'm in it, that's bad. So upgrade advantage for vSAN, or the reinitialized speed increase. Yeah, well, Pete, you were talking about that there's just, I don't want to say little things like that, but that's one of those things that in the release notes, it'll be one line, but it has such a huge impact.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, not only, obviously performance is a huge one. And the way there's so many little, every update cycle will release videos and blog posts and contents about all the new features, but it's hard to really pinpoint every single enhancement. Like the performance optimizations, it's hard to really articulate all the different things that are happening. Like just streamlining, changing the way resyncs happen. Significantly increases performance, but that's just one of many things that happens in these latest updates. I think, and I don't have the what's new deck in front of me, but another really big one was just changing the way we handle capacity and the way we handle space reservations, and so just it really increasing the amount of capacity that you have at your disposal in a cluster is just another enhancement. There's several of them out there, and I encourage people to go to core.vmware.com to see all the different features. But yeah, those are just a few that a little bit of a software upgrade. You've got more capacity, you've got more performance, and better tools at your disposal for things like upgrades, like VLCM, for example, to do the upgrades for you. I mean, that started in vSphere 7.0, but it got better in update 1 with increased scalability and other things, increased performance, and then in update 2 it got even better, and we can talk about that as well.
I think one thing which we need to call out specifically with vSAN and vSphere 7, if you are upgrading to vSphere 7, you get vSphere Lifecycle Manager, and for vSphere Lifecycle Manager, everything is solution, right? And vSAN is one of the supported solution over there. So in past, you basically need to be aware of your vSAN topologies in terms of availability zone and all those kind of things. Probably Pete can further explain that. But the thing with the VLCM is that VLCM is aware of these vSAN topologies, right? So if you are on vSphere 7 and you have vSAN, your overall ESXi host upgrade lifecycle becomes easy, because now VLCM is smart enough to understand the vSAN topologies and make the the decision while remediating the ESXi host. So probably Pete can further enhance on this little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is one of the beauties of VLCM. I'm sure most folks that are on this call right now have probably been using vSphere Update Manager for a while. And I think it's a great tool for updating individual hosts and, pulling down baselines but there's still a little bit of a manual configuration. And then it's sort of a one-time thing. You push this upgrade out and that's the end of the story until you do that again another time. With VLCM, as it pertains to lifecycle management, the story gets so much better because more than just creating a desired state, for all of your hosts in the cluster, that in itself sells it for me. But more than that, it checks for drift. It makes sure that everything that is in that desired state of your cluster is going to be no more and no less than that. Everybody has an environment where you might have an administrator that upgrades a host before you've actually certified that. So if you try to upgrade one host that's not in the desired state image, it's going to let you know, hey, this is not in the desired state. Probably more commonly, you replace some hardware. And then the firmware is out of date on that hardware once you replace the hardware. And so without having to manually go back and check, VLCM will come back and say, hey, I've noticed some changes here. You are no longer in compliance. And then the remediation for that is super simple. It's like you as the administrator see that there's a host or maybe multiple hosts that are out of compliance based on this desired image that you created. And then it's one click remediate, boom. And then it'll non-disruptively migrate the workload off the host, do the upgrades for you, restart the host. And if you're using firmware upgrades, which is an option, depending on the server vendors that you're using, you can also incorporate the firmware upgrades into that operation, all in one reboot. So now you've got your software, your ESXi, your drivers, your firmware, all happening in one reboot, non-disruptively, and you can remediate your entire cluster. So lifecycle management got a lot simpler when VLCM came out.
Yeah, that shift to desired state is such a huge thing, and I think we have so many years of not using it that it's kind of built into a lot of the processes that we have. But something like VLCM can actually change the way you manage your environment entirely because you're going to this desired state model instead. That's a pretty exciting direction, I think, for administration in general, because I think we've all been there where you're sitting there saying, okay, well, I started my install, and by the time I got to the end, something had changed, and I gotta go back. It just drives me nuts. And the piece about pulling in firmware there, particularly obviously for HCI, that's super critical. I love that shift as well, because it means just one less tool that the administrator needs to go mess around with.
Oh yeah, not only one separate tool, but also just one workflow, because you have to do these in separate workflows. Otherwise, you have to, and I don't know, I've been there. I know a lot of folks that are watching this have probably been there, where you have to like mount an image for firmware, pull, and then painstakingly do this on one server at a time. And there are ways to automate that, but it's very error prone. But having the ability to just say, hey, and even in update 2, having the ability to just copy an existing host and say, I like the way this host is configured. I like the firmware on it. It's up to date. I like the drivers and this version of ESXi. This host is ideal. And so I want all the other hosts in my cluster to be like this one. And so having the ability to do that without having to download anything or reconfigure anything, man, that's next level stuff.
We're doing the same sort of thing in 7 Update 2 with vCenter server profiles, where you can create desired state for your VCs and the entire configuration stack for your VCs, and it will track against server drift and config drift and things like that too. So it really is a shift in the way things are going. Like Vum is great. I love Vum. I grew up with that, and to me, it's a phenomenal.
We're nostalgic about Vum.
Yeah, I said I wouldn't do this, but here we are. But it's a great tool for managing ESXi and vCenter. That's it. Yeah. VLCM is a much broader tool set. I mean, NSX bits can be pulled in.
All the Tanzu parts.
Yeah, it's a solution, desired state solution manager, I would call that, rather than desired state solution configuration manager for lifecycle.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm just going to go on mute again here.
I want to see that on a t-shirt.
Yeah.
I do want to call out, though, that something that I don't think we mentioned explicitly, we've kind of danced around it, but to say it very explicitly, that VLCM understands things like stretch clusters, understands 2-node configurations, all of that stuff, and it's much safer. It makes way better decisions about how the order in which to patch something that's in one of those topologies, right?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, order matters, man, because like, especially when we're talking about vSAN, right? HCI, because the disks that are attached to those servers are the foundational, that is your storage. And so unlike vCenter, where you can have multiple servers being in a cluster being managed at the same time, with, for upgrades, with vSAN, we need to have this, we need to have a remediation strategy that takes into consideration the data placement of all of the vSAN objects. Because if you've got availability configured for like a mirror, for example, a RAID 1, you don't want to sit there and reboot both hosts that are hosting that vSAN object, right? Yeah, that would certainly be YOLO. And so maintenance mode is aware of that, always has been for years. VLCM is certainly aware of that, so it's a linear upgrade, rolling upgrade fashion for VLCM, but it takes it to the next level with stretch cluster, right? So in stretch cluster, similar thing. We can remediate up to, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 64 hosts at the same time. However, it goes by failure domain or fault domain. So if they're in the same fault domain, it's not going to remediate 2 hosts at the same time for the reasons that I just discussed. So it takes into consideration, vSAN's object placement before it actually does the remediation, and that extends to stretch cluster as well.
If you needed a business reason to convince your boss why to let you upgrade to vSphere 7, all of this stuff right here is perfect for it. Reducing risk, mitigating risk, simplifying operations. Oh, it's huge.
More tacos.
Yeah, when I was working for tacos, man, this was nowhere to be found. I'm telling you that much.
Yeah.
It was all me.
No, I like that taco plan. I'm starting to get hungry here.
Well, you're the one that scheduled a live meeting during lunch.
Yeah, my bad. Sorry. It's late for chatting and that, and I appreciate it. But no, it's fun. We've got Paul Brerin in the chat here as well.
Hi, Paul. Love Paul.
Speaking of great content, tinkertry.com. Great stuff out there. Good discussion. Thank you about patching. Thank you. We have a test lab that matches our production. The only thing that I'm going to say about that is I heard somebody say once that everyone has a test environment. Some people are lucky enough to have a separate production environment. Let's see. Yeah, sorry. I like that a lot, actually. To be fair, those of us who patch have been more than just VMware have been burned by bad patches from Microsoft and other vendors. Yeah, it's an industry-wide problem. We can talk about ourselves, and sometimes things go awry and whatnot. But being able to roll things out carefully and in an orderly fashion, staged rollouts, sort of exponential rollouts or logarithmic rollouts, I guess. Where you do 1 and then you do 2 and then you do 4 and then you do, or whatever, like stuff like that we need to be thinking about that, especially for patching and especially being able to respond faster to things. Rollback precautions. Good point about test lab. There's comments about update 2. Yeah, we're working on that. The UEFI thing, I'm assuming, is VxRail makes upgrades so easy. That's great to hear. We don't, in our positions, we don't actually work with the VxRail stuff directly that often, and so it's good to hear that Dell and other solutions, HPE stuff and whatnot, work really well for folks. Having such a lab, let's see. Please add links to the chat. Most of it's linked in core.vmware.com, but we can add the KB articles.
Yeah, there's a couple of what's new docs that are definitely that can walk through a lot of these. Another update in vSAN 7 update 2 was the faster reboots, which leveraging suspend to memory, which is
that's cool. Yeah.
Which is big for larger environments that have a lot of servers to get through. And
and for standalone hosts too. Back in the day when I put my customer hat back on here, I had some standalone ESXi hosts that were managed centrally, but they were all over the state of Wisconsin. And and being able to just quick suspend, like in the middle of the night, we could have totally quickly suspended the VMs, restarted those things, and gone again. That would have saved so much time.
Oh yeah.
Follow-up question regarding the 16 gig SD cards. Would there be any benefit from upgrading to larger SD cards or changing to different boot media like a Dell Boss card? Jeton, is that something that you can speak to?
I think it's very subjective in terms of what you are looking for. So, for example, if you upgrade from an SD card to, let's say, something like M2 SSD device, right? You can certainly do that, but then again, make sure that if you are creating a VMFS data store on a M2 device which has Esxi host running on it, don't deploy the virtual machines over there, right? Because then it will gradually decrease the overall optimization for the M2 device as you move on, right? So I think the choice of boot devices is very subjective to the customer infrastructure. We don't really see any reason why you can't upgrade or why you can't continue with what you have at this point of time. So I think it's very depending on your use case, what actually you are looking for.
I'll add a little bit onto that and say, depending on how old those SD cards are, you may want to consider replacing them, because with the program array cycle being relatively destructive to the medium on those cards, depends on what you're using them for. If it's just purely boot and you've redirected logs and you're not doing dumps on your SD cards and it's literally just a stateless sort of a boot device and it's only a year or so old, you're probably fine. But you really need to take a look at what it's rated for the terabyte writes per day, and then make a determination. Because if it gets old and literally you start getting bad sectors on that thing because of the PE cycles, you can put your host in a bad state on your next reboot. So it's worth looking at for sure. And something like an M.2 SSD device, even a small one, is if you can even find a small one these days, I don't know, but might be worth.
There's terabyte ones for $99. Not that you shouldn't. Yeah, you should definitely use enterprise grade stuff, but yeah, they're getting so cheap, man.
I think one more comment I would like to make over here on the system storage. Always prefer to offload the syslog to a centralized location. Please. It not only ease up the storage consumption, but it also give you the greater flexibility in terms of overall operational state in your infrastructure. So that's a good option to just turn it on and configure the syslog server on Esxi host. That's really a great way to do.
And from a security perspective, hey, syslogs, logging to a remote device. Don't log to something inside your cluster either. That's been an interesting thing lately. You know, it's hard to diagnose something when the whole cluster is down and the logs are in the cluster itself. Just, again, you know, going back to the DR model that Ken had brought up earlier, back when I had 2 sites, I would actually log across to each one of them. That way I could lose a site and I'd still have logs. I'd log to both of them, in fact, but I could patch. There was redundancy there. So let's see. While upgrading, we're getting AD port issues. Why is it not reflected in pre-checks? I don't know what an AD port issue. Does that ring a bell to you, Jeton, at all?
No, I don't really know what exactly this issue is.
Okay.
It's AD integrated.
Active Directory?
Yeah, that's
if it's integrated, if it's the IWA stuff, maybe it's looking for a firewall port that's not open or something like that. The ports.vmware.com is something I feel strongly about, because all the vSphere 7 data out there is something I've aggregated now, and it's taken me a while. Go out there. It's got all the firewalling stuff in there. And, you know, you can laugh. It's the least sexy work on the planet, honestly, aggregating firewall needs for an enterprise software product, but it needed to be done. It's something that was a burr under my saddle as a customer. And if you go out and look at vSphere 7 out there, it's got all of the inbound and outbound stuff. It's got ICMP, and we're backporting it in the next couple of weeks here. We're going to backport it to a lot of that stuff to 6.7 and 6.5 as well.
That's a good point about the pre-checks on there, though. I guess we just need more information. Okay.
Yeah. So Naveen, if you're still on, more information would be helpful. Does vCenter restore from image backup break any Elm replication?
Not necessarily, as I have explained earlier. Irrespective if you restore it from let's say a file-based backup or from image-based backup, always run the post upgrade script, which basically talks about if you have the external PSA controller with ELM. So it basically takes care of all the replication agreements. But important thing which I would like to highlight, just in case if that doesn't work and still you see the replication issues with your PSCs, you can always use something like VDC Wrap Admin, right? It's a utility which is available in the vCenter server. And I'm sure if you are on vCenter server 7, it's always be a VCSA, but the same utility is also available on a Windows vCenter server as well, right? So this particular utility gives you the option to look into the current state of your PSC replication, and you can choose to recreate the PSC replication with the other vCenter server in the enhanced link mode.
Cool. Yeah, and as you were saying that, I was thinking too that something that people don't realize, the replication is LDAP replication under the hood, and LDAP is an incredible multi-master database, and so it's got an idea of what's current and what isn't. It's very much like Active Directory is, where it keeps track of where the current position of everything is. And so if you restore something that's down level, if you restore an image that's behind the rest of the linked mode stuff, it'll catch up. It'll replicate all that stuff back across, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So cool. Let's see. What else do we have? Why does the update installer estimate 8 to 14 hour outage? Googling shows that it's way off. Well, my glib answer would be we're copying the status bar code from Microsoft or Apple, and where it jumps around. When I was a customer, I often one of the things that I often did, and I use vRealize Operations Manager for all my performance data and whatnot. So before an upgrade, I actually turned down the events, and I sent all my events and all that stuff off to a syslog collector, log insight, things like that. And so with vSphere and vCenter server, a couple days beforehand, I actually turned down the data retention on the vCenter server itself, so that it was less to copy across and things like that. Maybe that's playing in. Maybe it's a network speed thing. Jatin, do you have any thoughts on?
Yes, and I think we did spoke in our conversation as well in past, right? I personally believe that I think I'm hearing an echo. Yeah, it's good now. So I personally believe that the success or failure is always predictable. And when I say this, what I mean is that whenever you start the actual vSphere or vCenter or ESXi upgrade, always ensure that what's happening in your current infrastructure, right? There might be an outage which is happening or which is impacting your current Active Directory infrastructure. It may or it may not impact your the upgrade process as well. So most of the time what happens is you straightforward comes into the change window and then start doing the upgrade procedure without knowing that you might have some bottlenecks or you might have some constraint in your current infrastructure which is supporting the vSphere infrastructure as a whole. So I think these kind of operational practices where you basically assess what's happening around vSphere, things like DNS, things like Active Directory, things like certificate management, storage is one of the critical part of that infrastructure as well, right? If you assess the overall the happenings around the vSphere infrastructure, I think the success ratio for vSphere upgrade is going to be high, because you know that what's happening in your current infrastructure and what are the bottlenecks and limitation which are currently existing in your current infrastructure. I think it's more towards how you operationalize your vSphere upgrades.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. A couple of questions I see on here. I figure we can answer some of these pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Christian Wartz says,
Yep, I was just gonna go there.
Image-based VLCM will only work with clusters, not with standalone hosts. Am I right? So the way it works is you define an image at the cluster level, and then you have the ability at that point to remediate all of the hosts in the cluster or actual individual hosts. So if you have one host that you wanted to remediate, once, if the image is set up first, then you just, once that VLCM realizes that host is not in compliance with the image, you can just right click that one host inside of VLCM, inside of the update window, and then update just that one host if you really wanted to. Of course, it makes more sense if you're doing a bunch of them to remediate them all together, but you do have that option.
Hey, speaking of that, Christian was asking above, how many can you do at once? You had mentioned 64 at once.
So
Not that
concurrently, and again, with VLCM and vSAN, it always does them in a rolling upgrade fashion per fault domain, right? So, but if you had multiple, fault domains, it can do up to 64. And as of update 2, I'm pretty sure there's now 400 hosts that can be managed inside of VLCM. Inside of one VLCM cluster instance.
Cool. Let's see. Kim was saying that so ESXi 7 vSAN host reboots faster than 6.7. I suspect that goes in the under the umbrella of the the motto of IT, which is it depends. Does a reboot of a vSAN host under 7 is 7 faster than 6.7? I guess is the question, Pete.
Yeah. And that's not, it depends. It just is.
Oh, okay. My bad.
It actually, it's really, sorry, Pete, but it gets faster and faster with every release. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about being able to take advantage of the hardware more and more, even little things like CPU cycle tweaking and like, oh, well, we've optimized RAID 5.6 algorithms just slightly, which means that we're using slightly less CPU, which means we have just a little bit more.
But at scale, it's amazing, dude. And see, I'm even learning crap, this is great, so that's why I turned to the vSAN folks. So let's see, Pete, did you have any other ones that you wanted to aggregate here? Or?
Yeah, I saw another one. Let's see, where is it? I think I saw Sunil had a question. They're going so fast now, so I think I
host firmware and patch in one baseline, and the answer
the answer is definitely yes. If you're using VLCM, now here's the deal with if you want to do firmware upgrades, it depends on the server vendor that you're using. So you just go to the hardware compatibility guide and just verify. There's actually a field now under vSAN that will show you VLCM capable ready notes. And so just select that field inside of the hardware compatibility guide, and you'll see all the servers. And so we've got HPE, Dell, Lenovo. And so there's other server vendors that are out there. Just check that always to see if your server generation and an actual server is supported. Once you've got that nailed, then the next thing to consider is, and I won't go through the whole process, but essentially, in order for the firmware to be part of your image, you have to deploy a VApp. We call it a hardware support manager. This VApp comes from your vendor, your server vendor, so Dell, HPE, whatever. Once that hardware support manager is deployed inside of your vCenter and actually registered inside of vCenter, then you can start incorporating firmware images into your desired image, which is very different from just, aside from firmware, you don't have to incorporate anything to create a desired image. You can have ESXi and all of the vendor drivers. Those can be added without having to upload anything. It's just part of VLCM. That's right. Yeah.
my.vmware.com. You don't have to go find them anymore.
Yeah, right? You don't have to hunt them down. With the firmware, because firmware vendor is very specific to different versions. The firmware vendors are still creating these bundles, if you will. Like HPE creates a server bundle, an SPP, they call it, and this pack of firmware is specific to various versions of vSAN. So there's a firmware bundle for vSAN 7 Update 2. There's a firmware bundle for vSAN 7 Update 1. And so depending on the version that you're upgrading to, you just pull that firmware bundle from HPE, and then you can incorporate that into your image.
Other questions here. Let's see. Hearing quite a few failures with ESXi 7 and older SD cards. I'm going to go back to what Ken was saying there. An upgrade writes a whole bunch of new stuff to it, and changing the layout on an SD card. You're probably pushing the limits of the people don't understand that Flash, every time you write to it, you destroy it a little bit. And I think that's a fundamental thing that people need to understand. And especially for an SD card, which is not rated for very many writes. When you do a big operation to it, like restructure the whole disk, you're probably going to find, if it's an older device, you may find some errors. And so, as much as I don't like the idea that there's problems like that, it kind of makes sense in the grand scheme of things. Right, Ken?
Right. Absolutely. there are different ratings of devices on that front. So yeah, if people have heavy write profiles, you should really consider getting a write-oriented or a write-resilient SSD device for that sort of thing. Or SD.
Rated drive writes per day.
Yeah, there are different categories, but they all come down to number of blocks you can write on a particular section. It's the terabyte writes per day, all the rest of these different things, but different categories. And Pete is waving his hand in the air like he just don't care. Yeah,
Pete, you're muted.
Bob, I did.
Sorry, mute challenged.
I did.
Yeah, what I was going to say is go ahead. Sorry?
Okay. So, sorry to interrupt. I did share a couple of links in our chat.
Here, I'll copy them over.
I've already put them in.
Yeah.
I've been on top of that.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. Great. Thanks, Ken.
So Dineker M had a question, said, how long can we put a vSAN ESXi into maintenance mode while updating, patching ESXi? And so there's a couple of things to consider on this. When you put a host into maintenance mode inside of vSAN, you choose the way, whether it's ensure accessibility, for example. If you put it into a host into maintenance mode and it's in ensure accessibility, because there is another copy of that data somewhere on another host, whether it's RAID 1 or RAID 5, failures to tolerate equal 1 or equal 2, however you have it configured, there's already going to be data somewhere else on another host, and so therefore it will let you put it into maintenance mode. At that point, while that host is in maintenance mode, the object repair timer, which is a cluster level setting, is set to 60 minutes. So technically you have 60 minutes before vSAN will start to rebuild those objects on another host. And so you've got 60 minutes. Now you can extend that time if you wanted to, if your updates were taking longer than 60 minutes. Good news is as of update, I'm pretty sure it's update 1, while you're in maintenance mode, even though your data is only sitting on one host, vSAN is also making sure that from the time that the host went into maintenance mode, all writes are actually being offloaded to a third host, just in the event that the host that you put, the one host that's holding the replica, dies. If that one fails, while you're in maintenance mode, you don't lose all of the writes that have been happening. So there is a third location for it. So it's almost like cheating. It's almost like having a FTT equal 2, but you're not having to have a full-on FTT equal 2. So there's a lot of redundancy, which again goes back to our original conversation of why you want to continuously upgrade, because these little features really make a big difference.
Well, just being intelligent about that. If you don't need FTT equals 2 all the time, just being intelligent about when you can apply it, that's really cool. So again, learn something. That's really neat.
Hey, I noticed Mike Foley's in our chat here.
Heck yeah.
Answered some questions. So for those of you online, Mr. Foley is one of our colleagues here and authoritative on the subject. So
yeah,
it's actually some great conversation going on in the chat just in general with peer enablement.
Yeah, no, I really like doing that for doing these sort of things. We get great questions. We've had some feedback too, about the upgrade process. The VIB thing was good feedback. Some other things, I've been taking some notes here, and I really appreciate it. Other stuff here. ES says make sure the VC appliance can do an NS lookup to DNS, forward and reverse DNS,
Both.
A records,
Both.
PTRs. Some security people, misguided security people out in the world, think PTR records, reverse DNS records, are a security risk. They're not. That's security by obscurity. Hiding things does not make it more secure, because it's still got an IP address, right? It's an attacker is still going to find it out there. It makes it harder on the admins, and it's a base requirement of our software. So if your security folks have an argument with it, they can talk to our documentation.
Throw it on Twitter. We'll get out in front of that. Sorry, just quickly on the long forward, reverse, long, short. It's amazing how many plugins and things like that can break because you're not getting a reverse short, a forward short. It's baffling. So yeah, sorry about that.
No. That's a great point. And to that end, also, the upgrader and installer needs to be able to ping things. People shut off ICMP because security, and they shut off all ICMP, which is actually going to result in performance problems. ICMP is used for a lot of other things other than just ping and the echoes. But we do need echo between whatever workstation or whatever device you're running the upgrader and installer from to the vCenter that exists already and to the ESXi hosts. Okay. And if you go out to ports.vmware.com, I've documented all of that stuff out there. So you can just hand it to your enterprise firewall people and just say, make it happen, please. You know,
I can't hear ICMP without thinking about Insane Clown Posse. I'm sorry.
that's ICP, I think.
I know.
Yeah, I forgot my makeup. Sorry.
Juggalos. Whoop, whoop.
We should definitely do a Halloween version of this. Anyhow, I'm sorry.
The comments are going to go sideways now, aren't they?
What's the best practice on replacing hosts in a VMware cluster? I think this is probably more of a vSAN thing, Pete. So I want to get rid of a host and put a new host in. Is there a particular process for it?
For getting rid of a host?
Yeah. Or just maintenance mode and let it do its thing?
Yeah, well, you would do a full data migration. You do a full migration. If you're going to decommission the host, you're going to want to make sure.
Apparently.
Yeah, you definitely want to make sure you do that full data migration to get all that data off there before you decommission the host. But yeah, it's pretty straightforward. I tell you what, the one thing I love about being in this team is we get to really kick things and try to break them, and things definitely have been getting more and more resilient. You know, like you just being inside of our little nested Nimbus environments and just purposely trying to like, all right, I'm going to just destroy this host and see what vSAN does to fix it. And vSAN comes up and says, oh, okay, I see you're an idiot. I'm going to fix that for you. I'm going to rebuild this for you. Don't worry about it. It's gone. And so you almost can't even hurt yourself these days. But
challenge accepted.
Best practice is to certainly put your host in maintenance mode, full data migration, and then decommission the host, remove it from the cluster.
Cool. Looks like there's advice. If you have Dell on the SD reader, be sure to update your firmware. It fixes the write bugs to the chips. That's really cool. Thank you for saying that. Let's see. We perform
so far back in the comments here. That's
yeah, I know. It's here. I'm going to try to catch up here. We've got something from Naveen about the AD ports. Pre-checks. It's a VX Rail HCI upgrade, Active Directory port issues. I bet there's a firewall port that's not something that's firewalled that it doesn't like. And so I would check that. Again, ports.vmware.com. Sounds like a great plan. We've got all the AD ports out there now. So both inbound and outbound too. So let's see. Mike has been answering a bunch of this stuff. Is there a great resource for creating a multi-node nested vSphere cluster on a multi-node physical cluster? So you want like a test environment? That's Jatin and I have been talking about this. How do we want to actually document something like that? One of our coworkers, William Lamb, has got some resources on nested ESXi and things like that, and some OVAs out there. Otherwise, it's straightforward to do it yourself. Just it's actually a type of guest OS that's out there.
Let's be clear on that, though.
Yes,
really clear on this. Supportability of this is non-existent. This is not a supported configuration. Period.
You're your own lab.
Yeah.
Yep. I was going there, and that's because we get people that are calling my nested environment. It doesn't work or something's funky. And the community will help with questions like that. Usually it's a common thing. And the thing is, you're being your own hands-on lab. The hands-on labs work this way. And so it's a really great environment to do stuff in, and you can shut everything down and snapshot it. Then if you want to destroy vSAN, if you want to see what happens if you pull hosts out and replace them and don't do the right thing, you can always just revert the snap, and it's really nice. So anyhow, let's see. Any news regarding ESXi update from 7.0.7U1 to U2? I'm assuming that's a UEFI bug. There will be news. Stay tuned. ETAs are hard. You're asking for an ETA. ETAs are hard because of our obligations to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Sorry, we get into trouble talking about timeframes.
Right now, there is a capability around doing upgrades if you need to. And there are a bunch of KB articles around this. And fundamentally, if you use the ISO image and disable UEFI, which is pain, but if you have a compelling reason to get to 7.0 U2, you can follow it. But there is a way. Just use the ISO for the upgrades, but not recommended yet.
Yeah, and the fix is pending. We're really trying to make sure that the fix is the fix. So yeah. I think you should focus on the edge. I agree. vSphere is working great in the data center. I also agree. But if you have hosts all over the world with bad, slow connections, this is on a completely different page. Somebody asked the other day about about managing things over Starlink, and that really got a few people thinking around here that because Starlink, you can't fight physics, right? Well, you can try, but it's 300 milliseconds up, 300 milliseconds back. And and so I think you're onto something here, and I like where your head's at. Let's see, how long can you put? Okay, we've got a bunch of stuff. I'm going to skip forward, folks. I think Mike is tried to maintenance mode evac a host and it finished. It whined about all the disks being missing. Is there a faster way to tear down the disk config?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. So I'm a little confused on the question because if you do a maintenance mode and you do a full data migration, all of the vSAN objects will be pushed to other hosts, and so therefore it won't ask for anything additional. If in fact you did any of the other options, it will ask for those components, not so much the disks, right? We're talking about vSAN objects, right? So those components will then be missing, and ultimately after 60 minutes will rebuild and tell you to forget yourself. And we'll never ask for them again. But if you want to expedite a process like that and you really do want to blow a host up, once you've migrated all your data off of it, you could certainly go into the configuration at the cluster level inside of vSAN, and then you could delete the disk groups if you really wanted to do that. But obviously, I wouldn't recommend doing that unless you were getting rid of all of the data first. But a full maintenance mode, full migration should certainly never ask you for another vSAN object again. The disk itself doesn't come into the question because it's not looking for disks.
I think we might have missed a question here. Issue is is my question missed here? I don't know. I didn't see it in here. Can you ask it again? Sorry about that. We get a lot of... I like the interest. This is really cool. So we're
also favorite tacos. Anyone?
Oh, favorite tacos.
Is
anything
it steak,
with avocado
chicken?
lately? Steak with avocado.
Yeah.
Again, you're making me hungry. Yep. Mike's suggesting that we re-ask. So while we're waiting for that, Ken, you were going to say something a while ago, and it got lost. Do you happen to remember what that was? Do you have any salient thoughts here?
Do I look like the sort of person that remembers things?
I think one thing which I would like to add specifically to vSphere Lifecycle Manager, and this is something which most of our large customers are facing. So there are many customers who are doing vSphere auto deploy with stateless installation. The point is with vSphere Lifecycle Manager, only stateful installations are supported. Right. So if you are doing the stateless installation and if you want to leverage the vSphere Lifecycle Manager, consider migrating from stateless to stateful installation. And talking about the process, I think you simply need to change certain parameters in the host profile, choose the system storage cache setting to the stateful installation, and during the next remediation, it will ensure that the host is now part of the stateful installation. So for vSphere Lifecycle Manager, it is the stateful installation, and it is fully supported with vSphere Auto Deploy.
Cool. Yeah. No. The flexibility in which you can just deploy vSphere is amazing. And but it makes for all of these different scenarios that it's just like it's mind-boggling, all of the combinations of things. You've got stateful, you've got stateless, you've got stateful on all this different hardware, and I think it's a strength, but it can be a source of complexity too. Hey, I found the missing question. I'm really sorry that we missed it. How does VCHA take care of split brain configurations or a split brain situation in vSphere 7? I would start by saying it shouldn't be a split brain because there's always a witness node. You always build clusters in threes, right, to avoid having a situation where, well, it's kind of like the adage that a person with one watch always knows what time it is. A person with two watches has no idea, and So that's why we always build 3. And so when you deploy VCHA, you get a witness node as well. And so there should always be 2 in agreement. If you've got 3 that don't agree, that might be a different thing. But there should always be 2 in agreement. Do you guys concur? Or?
Yeah, and that logic extends to vSAN objects doing the same thing with a witness. So when you're making writes, your writes for every I/O is being written to multiple locations, and then there's a witness as a tiebreaker that also extends to stretch cluster. So even if you have a partition stretch cluster, there is a witness appliance that is making sure that there is a tiebreaker. There's always going to be quorum, and when there's quorum, we know which is the authoritative host, and so that is a situation that our support team does not see.
So what you're really saying is that the 2-node cluster is a myth. So, cool. Sorry about missing that question. But I think we're at the end. vSAN witness. Yeah, Mike has got a bunch of stuff in here. We've got some links into blog articles for creating DNS servers for home labs. My home lab is a little crazy. I actually use Keep Alive D on a Linux box to fail over between my DNS, and then I've got separate AD stuff because you shouldn't use your authoritative servers should be separate than your recursive DNS servers. But that's just the security guy in me. We're getting to the end here. We're actually 15 minutes past what we had said we'd do, but the beauty of this is we've got a lot of good questions and a lot of good comments in that. Why don't we just go around the loop here? And we got one more. We'll take one more. Eugene, I've been using a Power CLI configuration backup and restore to replace an ESXi server host server with new hardware. Is there a better method? Jatin's also our Power CLI guy. He's crazy like that. He's both upgrade and Power CLI. Do you have any thoughts on this?
It's an interesting question because I'm personally a big fan of a new project which is known as vSphere DSC. So as you are talking about the ESXi host configuration, I would recommend you to check the vSphere DSC project. So basically the idea is it used the declarative code style, and with that particular code style, you can create a configuration document. And as of today, it has got 70 plus resources to configure. It configures the vCenter server. It also configures the ESXi host. And you can think of any ESXi host configuration, it is being taken care, right? So the project basically allows you to create a declarative configuration document, and then with the help of Power CLI, or specifically, it basically used the PowerShell DSC, which basically stands for desired state configuration. You can apply that particular configuration document and then ensure that your infrastructure remains compliant as per the desired state configuration. So it's a great project. It is an open source project supported by VMware. So if you have got the SDK support, you can pretty much get the support for vSphere DSC as well. So it's pretty much the same support level as we have with Power CLI. So I think this is a nice project which you can certainly look out for the ESXi host configuration.
Cool. Thank you. There's a link. Do we have a link to?
Yes, I can quickly share that.
Jatin's working on a link. How to submit missing firewall rules. I just gave you all my email address. Be gentle with me. So here, I'll copy the link from Jatin there. To all, would you like to see ESXi on ARM officially supported as a vSAN witness node? It's unsupported right now. ESXi on ARM is actually not a product. It's also our worst kept secret, in my opinion. But yes, I think there's a lot of interest in ESXi on ARM as little nodes and whatnot. So, yeah. Let's see. Oh, okay. The missing ports. If there's missing ports, send them to. Why don't you send them to me, and I will get. If they're in other products, I will get them to the right folks. So cool. So let's go around the ring here and just tie it all off. Ken, why don't we end with Ken? Ken's always got stately sort of perspective. So why don't we start with Jatin? We'll start the way we started earlier, and why don't we lead with Jatin? Jatin, in closing, what would you like people to take away from the upgrading and patching session here?
I think you don't really need to worry about upgrading to vSphere 7. It is just you need to do a good homework in terms of understanding where you stand today and where you want to go. There is a complete documentation which is available at docs.vmware.com, and the upgrade process is super easy. And as I've said, right, it actually boils down to the operational practice, how you start the upgrade project in your environment, and that's where success or failure lies actually, right? But within the product, if I say, the upgrade process has greatly simplified. The second thing which I would like to conclude, we have talked a lot about vSphere Lifecycle Manager. Remember, this particular feature starts with vSphere 7, right?
Yeah.
So upgrade to vSphere 7, and then you can start leveraging to the vSphere Lifecycle Manager. But yeah, if you are still on 6.5 and 6.7, we still have the VUM. We still have the upgrade procedure supported with something like vSphere Auto Deploy. So you can pick and choose the way you want to upgrade. So yeah, I mean, that's it. I think the upgrade process is simplified greatly in terms of vSphere 7.
Cool. Pete, what about you? What would you like to convey to people as part of this whole thing? So,
well, I'll tell you what, that about sums up some of my thoughts for sure. And the big one was, because we do get this question a lot, is, and I'll repeat that, is it does start at 7, right? So customers that are on 6 dot something are always like, oh, I want to use VLCM. Well, you got to get to 7 in order to start playing. So if you get to 7, don't stop there. There's plenty of ways to simplify your upgrade process from 7 all the way up to update 2. And there are plenty of rewards for doing that. I think the days of, keeping a server in the back, to avoid getting fired and don't upgrade it, I think those days are long gone. I think that there's enough resiliency, there's enough checks involved in the process to make sure that you can have a smooth upgrade process. I definitely highly encourage everybody to get to the latest version of vSphere as soon as possible, and do it with VLCM, because it'll make your life a lot easier.
Nice. Ken, wrap us up here.
All right. Well, now I feel like I should be more stately or
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Or senatorial. I don't know.
You could be kid-like and immature,
I don't think those are mutually exclusive either. You can have very immature statesmen. Anyway, let's get political to round it up. No, I think to me it comes down to the importance of having. It goes back to what I was saying at the start in terms of that intersection between hardware and the user. And in order to take advantage of the hardware to its optimal state, you need to have an up-to-date infrastructure with which to do that. But what that infrastructure is and what represents our cloud infrastructure, our cloud platform, is really starting to change as well. And you see VMware Cloud Foundation as part of this. It's an aggregation of compute, network, and storage in one platform, one virtual software-defined platform. So if we do that, if we have this platform that gives us all of these compute, network, storage, security, management, all of these things as a unit, managing that becomes a larger task if you're trying to do that through individual silos. Forget the firmware and driver and all the rest of these things. What we want to do is use something like VLCM to be able to manage the full stack, which is the cloud platform. Yeah. And when we start looking at where we're going with some of this technology, the next generation of what we're doing with vSphere and Cloud Foundation, this monolithic SDDC, it's all about that intersection with hardware. I just posted a blog around Project Monterey, which is what we're doing with some of these things like SmartNICs and DPUs in terms of offloads. So in order to take advantage of the next generation software-defined cloud foundation using the emerging hardware types and integrating with AI/ML workloads through GPUs and all the rest of these pieces, pulling them together, we don't want to have to manage that individually or as discrete entities, or have one piece of that fall behind. It makes it far more difficult to take advantage of that next generation of foundation. If you say, well, I've upgraded everything, but my ESXi hosts are still on 6.5. Well, then you're not going to get the benefits of that next generation of platform or the next generation of hardware in the same way that you would if you had everything up to date. So by upgrading, you're reducing the amount of management that you need to do while optimizing the overall cloud platform and taking advantage of the next generation of hardware. So I think it's critical. I mean, absolutely not. There are tactical reasons why, getting away from inefficient code perhaps, or getting away from unintegrated product sets and things like that, reducing your risk, reducing your exposure, reducing all sorts of reasons on an individual basis. But from a platform perspective, I think that's what it's all about, is making sure that you're set up to take advantage of both the hardware and software optimizations.
Cool. No, I completely agree. Staying up to date, and putting your support contract to good use too. Staying up, and just I think it was Pete earlier that said that we have an army of developers and engineers working on this stuff. We also have an army of user experience designers that work on this stuff too, to try to really work out the workflow, make it easy for the people. It turns out there are people that run these infrastructures, and make it easy for people to do the right thing, do it securely, and all that stuff. So cool. Well, this has been a great conversation. I think there's just one other question in here. Jeff N was asking about IPv6 for vSAN data stores to mount to another compute cluster. I didn't know. Duncan Epping apparently said something about it. Pete, do you know anything about IPv6 enablement on vSAN?
No, I'll have to read the question. If you want to hit me offline, I'll answer the question offline. I'll have to read the whole context of it.
Yeah, Pedro Arrow on Twitter. Why don't you hit him up on Twitter, and Pete can figure it out with you. So really appreciate it.
Amazing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
What is amazing?
Ken.
So cool. Well, thanks, folks. And join us next month. We're going to do one of these at the end of, I think we're already to May almost. Holy buckets. We're going to do one of these again at the end of May, and don't know the topic yet, but if you keep an eye on our blog, keep an eye on our Twitter account, the VMware vSAN account, the VMware vSphere account, our blogs, virtual blocks, and just the vSphere blog. I guess we don't have a great title for that one. And and on Reddit too. I've been posting this stuff out on Reddit so that people can see. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We could be some of the YouTube subscribers. Ring the bell, But hey, we like the subscribers. You'll get automatically notified of new stuff. And we're putting more and more stuff out there too. Same for vSAN. Check them out. I hear they're cool. Pete's a cool guy. Storage is always nice, having somewhere to put your stuff. So with that, I bid you adieu. Thank you all.